Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for watching. So today's video is fully focused on how to get a flawless long wearing foundation. Just a warning, this is a lot of makeup, so if you're into natural, then maybe this isn't for you. This is for my full coverage people, but if you dabble in a bit of full coverage, or if you're a bit more natural, you can still take elements from this makeup. You don't have to do every single step that I do. You can just take parts and make it your own, and hopefully some tips and tricks will help you and you can put it into your own makeup routine. So I really hope you learned something today. If you do want to see how I got this skin look, I show you from primer to bronzer, all that kind of thing. So if you want to know how to achieve it and learn some more tips and tricks, then just keep on watching. Hey guys, so today's video is hey everyone, so today's video I'm doing an eye look for you, and I kind of talk you through some tips and tricks on how to blend eyeshadow and how to achieve this super smoky look. I did say in my last tutorial that I was going to do something a bit more smoky, so I really hope you like it. If you do want to learn how to get this look, then just keep on watching. Of course, the number one rule to making your foundation last all night long is obviously primer. Not everyone needs to prime. It all depends on your skin type, and it also depends on what your skin concern is. So for example, if you're dry, you want to go for more hydrating. Oily, you want to go for more oil controlling, and then textured, you might want to go for more of a smoothing primer. The one that I have used today is the Hourglass Veil Mineral Primer. This is oil free, and of course you want to make sure you are nice and moisturized, because if you're going to be using quite a lot of foundation, then your skin needs to be really prepped and hydrated. So we're going to start off with foundation. So the number one foundation that I like to use when I want my makeup to last all day long, and that is the MAC Studio Fix Fluid. So I wouldn't typically use this on a day-to-day basis. This is my night out foundation because I know it lasts on me. So the trick in making your foundation last all night long is to apply it in very thin layers. So this is more towards the people who like full coverage foundation. You can just go in with one layer and you're good to go, but this is typically for a kind of night out makeup look and someone who likes full coverage. But what you don't want to do is go in with a really thick layer straight away, because it's a bit like when you're painting a wall. If you go in with a really thick amount of paint, it ends up kind of cracking, and that is kind of like your foundation. If you use too much too soon, then it will just end up kind of cracking and separating straight away. That's what I have found personally anyway. So the thing that I like to do is to just do a very thin layer all over your skin, and then just to kind of even it out, and then you can build it up in the areas where you need to. And I prefer to use a sponge. That is just my personal preference, and the reason why I like a sponge is because it really presses it into the skin, and I find sometimes a brush just kind of moves it around and it just kind of, it looks like it's kind of sitting on top of the skin basically. So with the sponge, you want to dampen it, is that a word? You want to wet it underneath the tap, and you want to like really wring it out and kind of squeeze it in a paper towel or into a towel, because you don't want it to be soaking, because that's when it's going to kind of make your foundation pick back off of your skin. Then once you've got a nice blank canvas, you can go in and have a look at any areas where you want more coverage. So I always typically need more coverage around my chin, but that is personal preference to you. And also another reason why I go in with a thin layer is because a lot of skin types will actually soak up the foundation. If you are oily, you may find that your skin will actually just like soak up any makeup, and your skin can actually hold a lot of foundation. And then on the other hand, you might find that you've got a little bit drier skin and your skin can only take so much foundation, / you only need a small amount, say if you've got really clear skin as well. And some areas I will leave with just kind of one layer, like my forehead doesn't need a lot of coverage, so I kind of just use whatever's left on the sponge over that area. And anywhere where you might have some fine lines, so I have fine lines in between my eyebrows, so I avoid putting too much product there because too much product will obviously accentuate those areas. And then the same as the smile lines, you might want to avoid putting too much product there or on your fine lines around the eyes. We're going to go in with concealer now. So this is the Too Faced Born This Way concealer, and this is in the shade Shortbread. Sorry, I didn't say what colour I am in the foundation. This is NC37 by MAC. So as for concealer, I prefer to use a full coverage and one that is more liquidy, because I find that is the kind of best sort of formula underneath the eyes, I personally think, because it's not too creamy. Anything too creamy will tend to move around and settle into fine lines. So I basically kind of pop this on the inner part of my eye, and then anywhere where I have darkness, so that's kind of on the outer part here, and then a little bit kind of where the shadow is. So this particular concealer you don't need a lot of, a little bit does go a long way, and it's quite full coverage as well, so you don't need a lot. And I'm going to use the exact same sponge, just the other rounded side, to blend that in. And again, I am going to dab that up and down, kind of bounce it, but when I move it around, I'm not going to take it right underneath the eye just yet. I'm just going to kind of spread it across, because like I said, it's a little bit goes a long way, so it will kind of move about, so you don't need to swipe it all the way underneath the eye, because you can always add more. Sometimes less is more when it comes to the under eye if you do suffer from fine lines, because if you use too much product, then that is just going to settle into fine lines. And then once you haven't got much left on your sponge, you can then look up and dab that underneath your eye, because it's always easier to add more if you need it, and take whatever's left onto the eyelid. And then another little tip, if you really want to kind of lift the cheekbone, is to pop a little bit of concealer kind of on this part of your face, kind of above by your temples and on the top of the cheek, and that will lift that area. I'm actually going to use another concealer for this because I don't really need it for coverage. If you ever want to use concealer to highlight, I always recommend using something that is lighter coverage, because we've got a full coverage everywhere. We don't actually need to add any more coverage anywhere else. So this one is purely for adding highlight. It's a nice sheer kind of concealer. It blends out so seamlessly and so easily. This is the Morphe 2 Hide and Peak Concealer, and this is in the shade Peak of Buff. So as you can see, it's a little bit lighter than my natural skin tone. It's nothing too kind of stark white. It's just a couple shades lighter, so it gives a really nice kind of subtle lift. And then again, you can use this kind of underneath the cheekbone. All it's doing is just adding a highlight there. So this is kind of typically like reverse contouring. So as you can see, by putting it underneath that cheekbone, because it's a little bit lighter, it's kind of lifting that cheekbone even without putting bronzer or contour there. So once you have done your concealer, this is the part where you can obviously add cream bronzer or cream blusher. It's completely up to you. But if you're going to use any cream products now, I would recommend using a cream blusher. The reason why I like to use a cream blusher sometimes is because blusher is the one thing that will fade pretty much first on your face. I I think it's just because your skin will soak up kind of any colour, and obviously because it's colour on the cheeks, it will just fade first. So I'm going to go in with a cream blusher today. And the one that I have been loving at the moment, I've used it quite a few times. I think I used it in my last tutorial. This is the Morphe 2 Perk Up Cheek and Lip Colour. This is in the shade Hibiscus Hottie. So it's like a stick like this. When you have a full coverage foundation on, personally I wouldn't use the stick and swipe it on, because you do run the risk of moving your foundation. It doesn't always happen, but sometimes it can. So just to minimize that risk, I'm just gonna get it on the back of my hand like I did last time and just warm it up and use it from the back of my hand. And you want to use something that isn't too fluffy but isn't too kind of compact, because you don't want to you don't want to pick your foundation back up when you apply it. So I'm just going to get it on a Spectrum CO7 brush. I absolutely love using this brush for cream bronzer, and I'm going to very, very lightly tap this onto my skin, and you want to do it very lightly because, as I said, you don't want to move any of that foundation. And I'm bouncing that on basically like the top of the cheek. I'm not using it on the apple, so using it kind of more on the cheekbone, it will give you that really nice lifted look, especially if you have more of a round face like I do, and that will just make it really lifted. If you have a longer, skinnier face, then you might want to use it right on the apples of your cheeks, and that will just make it a little bit fuller. But it's all about what kind of look you're going for and whether you want to give the illusion of a fuller face. It's completely up to you. Although we are going to go in with a powder bronzer, I do want to use a little bit of cream bronzer just to show you the option. I personally wouldn't usually go in with a cream bronzer. I would just go in with a powder bronzer, but if you find that your bronzer is kind of going patchy throughout the day, or if it's just not lasting, you can double up and go in with a cream bronzer. This one is actually a concealer, but just a few shades, or quite a few shades darker than my natural skin. This is in the shade Chestnut. I'm just going to pop that on the cheekbone. So because this has a warm undertone, it's not going to typically contour. It is going to add warmth, but it will add shape at the same time. So I'm just using that on a Spectrum B05 brush, and again we are just bouncing that product in. Again, you don't want to swipe so you don't ruin anything underneath. I feel like I've said that loads, but yeah, always bounce when it comes to the skin if you want a kind of full coverage kind of look. So I'm just getting a little bit, just working it into the brush and then dabbing it in. If you're struggling to blend it, just go in with your sponge just to dab it up and down like so. So you can see it just adds a little bit of warmth. I will say if you struggle to blend like cream products, then sometimes cream bronzer can be difficult to blend, and if you apply too much it can be a little bit scary. So if you're going to pick one or the other, I would recommend going in with a powder bronzer, but I just wanted to show you both so you have the option. All the cream products done. You might feel like that is a lot of makeup already, but as I said, you can take elements from this and just do whatever works for your skin type. So you can just skip the cream blusher and bronzer if you feel like it. To be honest, sometimes I will just use concealer and then powder, and then use a powder, blusher and bronzer. It depends how long I have, to be honest. This is very extra. This is kind of very Makeup by Ariel. He will use a lot of cream products before he powders. I do feel like it makes such a difference with how my makeup looks. It gives it that extra oomph. I never use that word. Now that we've got all our cream products on, we can go in with powder. So if you're gonna get any products, then I would recommend getting this one. because this is the one product that I find makes such a difference with making my foundation last so much longer. And that is the translucent powder by Mercier. I just find it is the best powder out there. I really notice a difference when I don't use this day to day. I don't like to use it day to day because I don't want to use too much of it, but when I use my Too Faced powder I find my makeup actually moves around a lot more, whereas this one really seals it in place. So before you go in with your powder, you want to make sure you get rid of any product that has settled into your fine lines. So you basically just want to look up and just dab out any product and just kind of re-smooth it. And the trick is to go in with a powder puff. So skip the brush, you need to use a powder puff because honestly it makes your under eye and anywhere else look so smooth, because what it's doing is it's really pressing in that powder and locking it in. So we're not necessarily baking. I personally find baking can look a little bit dry on my skin. I will use it on some areas and it really does make your foundation last longer when you bake. Maybe I'll do it for a couple seconds, but I won't necessarily leave it on because I feel like you don't necessarily need to with this technique. So you just want to dab the powder puff in your powder, then you just want to dab it onto your hand just so it is evenly coated, so you haven't got any kind of chunks of powder on your powder puff. And then literally just very lightly push it underneath the eye. I kind of take it down to where my pores are because it makes pores look so smooth. I do it kind of the sides of the nose because I always find it settles in there, and that will make your concealer locked in all day long. So I just want to show you close up, so I'll zoom you in. Okay, so that is the side with powder, and then that is the side without. So yeah, those, you can just see my pores there, and that is the other side. So it really does smooth out your pores, and I do feel like that is a combination of doing that technique and the powder itself. The same as the under eye, you want to smooth out any product that might have settled in. So that is typically my smile line. So you can do this face and just bounce out the product, and then you want to get your powder and do that same face and just bounce it on top. And that will just prevent it from settling in and making it really prominent, because although you'll never be able to get rid of your fine lines, you will always be able to see them. Concealer and powder will not make your fine lines disappear, but what it will do, it will basically, the powder will just ensure that the makeup will just prevent it from settling into the fine line, because once it settles in, it kind of separates, and then you haven't got any product in that fine line, and then it accentuates it. Whereas when you powder it, it's kind of keeping that product smoothed over the top, and then the powder will kind of lock it in, but you'll still kind of, you know, you'll have the fine line there. You've got natural smile lines, natural fine lines. It is very normal. You're never going to get a completely smooth under eye unless you get surgery. So hopefully that makes a bit more sense. Then as for the rest of my skin, I will stick with that same powder, but I will get a big fluffy brush and coat the brush in the powder and literally dab that all over my skin, so over the cream, blusher and bronzer to set everything. So you may think by using all that powder you are going to look crepey and dry and just too matte, but the trick is to use a setting spray, and honestly it is not a gimmick. Like, setting spray really does work. And obviously you've got different types of setting spray. So you've got something like the facial spray by BADESCU, which is just going to add hydration. But the great thing about these kind of products is it will settle down any powders and just make the powder look more kind of not necessarily like skin, because it's not going to look like natural skin when you're using all of these products. It will ensure that the powder isn't sitting on top of the skin, and it will just make the texture look a little bit less powdery. I like to use this one after I've used that kind of powder puff. You've obviously got your kind of setting spray that is going to make it last longer. So this is the All Nighter Urban Decay setting spray, which I will use last. But now we have powdered everywhere, we can go in with our powder bronzer. So my favourite bronzer is Dark Deepest by MAC. I also really like Give Me Sun. This one is just a little bit more of a deeper golden kind of tone. So I'm going to use that on a Morphe M405 brush. And again, as always, we are going to dab that onto the areas where we put the cream bronzer. So I'm also going to pop a little bit of bronzer kind of around the nose. I'm not kind of contouring, I'm just adding a bit of warmth, just so the bronzer isn't just around the outer part, it's just kind of balancing it out. The exact same technique as the concealer earlier, you can clean up your powder bronzer. So if you ever feel like you're a little bit sloppy, you can just go in with your powder puff and add a little bit of powder there to really seal it in place. So I literally just buff it off straight away, but it just gives a really nice soft contour. So that is pretty much all the steps done. I know it is a lot of steps, but as I kept saying, just take elements. You don't have to do every single step. I'm going to go ahead and do my eyes for another video, and I'll show you the finished look. Okay guys, so this is my finished look with the eyes done. I do have a tutorial on this eye look coming soon, or you would have already seen it, I'm not sure, but I'll link it down below if it is already up. But yeah, I really hope you learned something today. Let me know what you want to learn next. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, comment down below, and please subscribe if you are new here. Thank you again for watching. You'll see me in my next one. Bye!